looking from the bottom up, identifying not from the point of people in charge, but from the people who may need a break now and then. Although, to be very frank, I haven't done any customer service for maybe an hour now. I'm also a nerd, meaning often that I'm kind of impatient. I'm often focused on what can be done in the here and now. I also dislike being told what I already know, and the reality is that everyone here, especially consider the age ranges I see, people here already know a lot about the everyday aspects of crowdsourcing. A lot of it has to do with using Facebook or Twitter or whatever, just sometimes to give the other person a break. Because as far as I'm concerned, crowdsourcing is about using technology to give the other person a break. Sometimes, though, you use this crowdsourcing technology in large numbers to try to make things better for everyone. I've also looked at the history of what this crowdsourcing stuff is about, and I took a look about its use in the past. A bunch of people were centered around a guy named Paul of Tarsus. These were early Christians. They built themselves some crowdsourcing technology, which they called a network of churches. And they got this guy Paul, later St. Paul, and they decided that he would write what he called epistles. We would now call them blogs, and that worked out pretty well. Later on, a guy picked up that gauntlet, so to speak, named Martin Luther. He had his own ideas about the way Christianity should take, and he made use of crowdsourcing technology using the same church store and forward network. The difference there is that he made use of what one of my colleague nerds invented, the printing press. The mistake, of course, that Gutenberg made is that he did a great job with the technology. He had a great job done with the manufacturing, but like a lot of my colleagues in Silicon Valley failed to do, he screwed up financing and then got screwed in turn by his venture capitalists. Later on, people made use of crowdsourcing to affect large-scale social change regarding the British Glorious Revolution. Later, bloggers like Thomas Paine and Ben Franklin got this American Revolution going, and more recently, people in France made use of crowdsourcing technology to create something called Les Mis. And by the way, I'd have no personality if it weren't for comedy. But now we have the present day, and now we do see people using crowdsourcing for everyday practical means, sometimes at the small scale to give people a break, maybe to create jobs, sometimes in larger scale. You look at Kickstarter, you look at Indiegogo, and you see ordinary people getting together with ordinary people to get the funding they need to build something new and innovative. As a nerd, I've fallen prey to some of the gadgetry involved. I'm wearing one watch that I got through Kickstarter. The downside is that in a month or so, I'll have two more. And I think I've stopped at this point, but I may need help stopping me. In larger ways, too, people have used crowdsourcing to fund political movements. That's happened on all sides of the spectrum. The Obama campaign was the pioneer of that, unless you want to give even more credit, 4 years earlier to the Howard Dean campaign. People are using crowdsourcing in the here and now, and to give people a break, and also, though, to work on a much larger stage, and that does manage to happen. My focus with this craigconnects thing is primarily in the here and now, leading to what could be bigger things. In this country, we have something called kiva.org. Its focus is microfinance. That's invented overseas, but the thing is that a lot of ordinary people can contribute in small amounts to help people out, to give people a break, just to get a business going out of the back of their house. They only may need a few $100 or $1,000 or $10,000, which in the U.S. is not a lot of money to start a business with. But if you're in the West Bank, $1,000 will get your business going. So Kiva is a good way to do things. In this country, there's something called donorschoose.org. There, a lot of teachers in this country, well, they're in low-income schools, and they have to often fund projects out of their own pockets. Sometimes those projects are get enough pens and paper to last the year. That's a good way where ordinary people like us, could just throw a few dollars into a teacher, making their jobs, their lives a lot easier, helping out a lot of kids. And throughout the world, I figure everyone should get to participate in this thing. So, well, there's this think locally, act globally thing. If you want to give people a voice, then get them on the net. In San Francisco, where I live, and love to, I guess, there's something called the Women's Building, which needed a hand getting a lot of people online. There's the Tenderloin Tech Center, and the Tenderloin is kind of our version of Skid Row. But there's also the Veterans Success Center and the Student Vets Lounge at CCSF. Other ways you can help people out. Think globally. Well, there's a group called Invenio in San Francisco, which focuses on how do you get serious bandwidth to places which don't have it. So we're working with them in Haiti, working with them in a couple places in Kenya, maybe Uganda, India, and working with them by trying to wire up all of the vocational schools in the West Bank. The deal is, if you want to get people involved in crowdsourcing, that means getting them a voice, and the only way I know how to do that is to get them online. This stuff is a lot of what this Craigconnects stuff is about. The idea is that I figure I can stand up and work in the here and now to get actual real stuff done in the here and now and to go beyond that stuff. First, I do want to ask people here, well, sometimes you have discretionary income and sometimes you don't have discretionary income. If you do, you can get involved in groups like Kiva or Donors Choose. I haven't announced it yet, but I'm working rapidly as of today, and I mean today, to working an effort where people can work together to help fund the low-income schools which primarily serve military families. That ain't bad. There's other stuff going on. I may be also working on a campaign with a group called CrowdRise, the focus of which will be to support those groups which support veterans, and in particular, wounded warriors and their families. These are small things that we can actually go ahead and do together. Again, these are things that you can do in the here and now. Hidden objective. Well, I heard this quote. This guy said that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. This is something said by the other Martin Luther guy. What he's saying is that things do get better if we work together on this. Now, I'm no community organizer. I'm a nerd, so I realize, hey, that would mean working with people, like face to face. By the way, that was a joke. But what I can do is online get people to work together more and more. I'm still figuring out how I do that. This Craigconnects stuff with the here and now kind of stuff, the hidden agenda is to figure out over a long-term period, how do we get people to work together in large numbers to have what the philanthropists call social impact? What that basically means is, how do you get people together to work together in large numbers, like St. Paul did, like Luther did, like Thomas Paine did? How do you make this happen in very large numbers to get real stuff done? So I am trying. I don't know what I'm doing, but I've started on a 20-year program, and I speak literally. I've started on a 20-year program to go boldly where no nerd has gone before. Thanks, folks. I'd like to accept primarily questions articulated in the form of a joke.
Well, is the panel ready with a joke question or a regular question?
I don't know if it's a joke question.
Okay.
But since you've been working in sort of this area for a while now, what do you see as the future of the microfinance sort of area? Is there a market of such things? Because I can imagine with you start naming Kiva and you start going down a list, there's a dozen or 20 now. Will there be 500 in 5 years? Or how do you see this kind of market going in terms of things like CraigConnect?
Microfinance and how well it's working. Throughout the world, I don't have a clue. I talk to the Kiva folks in general, and they say they're getting a much higher rate of return than U.S. banks have gotten in the last 15 years. And now and then I get a notice saying that somebody that I had given a loan out to has paid their loan off. That ain't bad. So I'm acting to some large extent on faith. I know that I'm getting some results. So I know that this little bit of money that I'm putting in is working. And that's it. Sometimes you do have to work on faith. And the best I can tell you then is that a nerd's got to do what a nerd's got to do.
Is there a question from the floor?
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Learning how.
Sorry?
Learning how.
Learning how.
Learning how, okay. I have some hearing loss. Learning how. Who?
How are you learning from these mistakes, and how are you going to share them with the rest of us? Because you're doing a lot of important things on the edges, and other people need to know.
What I'm doing is working with other people to try to figure out how to work together. When I have a success, I tell people about it. It's on my blog on craigconnects. I put it on a Huffington Post, sometimes other places like The Hill and so on. I don't have the right megaphone that I need to get all this out. Part of it has to do with the problem of herding pigeons, getting different nonprofits and so on to work together to amplify their message together. Haven't learned how to, because this involves the skills of public relations, communication, social media, and pretty seriously, I'm a nerd. Those skills are the opposite of what I'm about. What I need to be is more Don Draper and less Mr. Spock. By the way, of course, Captain Picard, Captain Kirk, you know my answer for that.
Thank you for now.